We have finally figured out what kind of system the New World Order is going to be. And it's not communism, and it's not capitalism, and it's not a monarchy or a democracy. I'm Alex Newman, and this is Behind the Deep State. The deep state, we all know, has been pushing for this idea of what they call a new world order, like this.
To bring China into the creation of a new world order.
And for the international order that we have worked for generations to build.
Bush said, and it's a phrase that I often use myself, that we needed a new world order.
Out of these troubled times, our fifth objective, a new world order, can emerge.
For a long time now, we've been discussing and debating what is this new world order going to look like. And so people on the left wing of the political spectrum sometimes say, oh, it's going to be a capitalist new world order where the capitalists are going to treat us all as slaves and steal the fruits of our labor by exploiting us and busting up our unions. And then you have those on the more right wing side of the spectrum say, oh, it's going to be a communist new world order. Well, not exactly. Turns out the New World Order is going to be what is called a technocracy. And that's a term that really has not been much in use in the popular lexicon, but it's a really important term, and it's been around for a really long time. To kind of understand it in a simple way, basically just imagine getting rid of individual liberty under various pretexts, saving the environment, saving the whales, saving the planet, or economic efficiency, making sure we don't waste resources on silly things. And so different pretexts are used, but the common thread that runs through all of it is that we're going to get rid of representative government. We're not going to have kings or Congress or anything like that. Instead, we're going to be ruled by technocrats, basically scientists and engineers under the control of the elite. So you might think of it as kind of like a scientific dictatorship, or at least a pseudo-scientific dictatorship. Now, the term has been around for a really long time. Actually, it popped up in the 1930s. In 1932, the head of Columbia University, Nicholas Murray Butler, announced that his radical university, which was already filled with communists and kooks and quacks of all varieties. Of course, that was the home of John Dewey, the guy who helped dumb down the American people through the public school system. Not to mention the Frankfurt School, the sickos who came over from Germany and tried to deconstruct morality and civilization. And they decided they were going to support this idea of technocracy. Now, there was a big scandal. It's actually recounted in this book that I'll come back to shortly by Patrick Wood. And the term kind of got a nasty smell to it. But the technocrats did not give up easily. So they then formed this magazine called The Technocrats, surprise. And in 1938, they defined technocracy this way. They said it's the science of social engineering, the scientific operation of the entire social mechanism to produce and distribute goods and services to the entire population. How cute, right? So we have no need anymore for private property. We get rid of money, get rid of prices that are arrived at in a free market through the forces of supply and demand. And basically you have this new system where the accounting unit would be like energy or CO2 now. We hear a lot from the United Nations. Resources, basically. A resource-based economy is a term you often hear associated with technocracy. So individuals essentially become cogs in the machine. The elites, the engineers, and the scientists decide what should be produced, how it should be produced, and then you just kind of get plugged into the system wherever the scientific dictators think you would best fit. And if you notice, there's a lot of resemblance here with the central planning that was tried in the Soviet Union, that was tried in communist China, and that has been a failure everywhere it has ever been tried. Now they say they have big data, though, so they'll make it work this time. My first encounter with this really bizarre ideology of the elites was actually by a guy who tried to present himself as being an opponent of the elites, as this guy who just had this great idea to restructure the world. His name was Jacques Fresco. He founded something called the Venus Project, promoting the alleged marvels of this resource-based economy. And he had his sidekick, Peter Joseph, a guy who won't tell anybody his last name. And this guy had come on my radar too. He had created this thing called the Zeitgeist movement, working very closely with Jacques Fresco. And some of his comments were really, really bizarre. He said people who have children are self-serving. They don't care about the carrying capacity of the earth. And he said he wouldn't mind a one-child policy imposed by the government once the population pressure got serious enough. So, I mean, these guys are totalitarians to the core. One of his big videos that got really famous was just anti-Christian propaganda. Actually, very easy to discredit if you know anything about the truth of the Bible and the truth of history. But he got over 100 million views on this video, and the New York Times loved it. They wrote this glowing review about Z-Day and Joseph and all this crazy ideas they were peddling. Not one critical word about these guys or their crazy plans. And one of these movies associated with this movement actually won an Artivist Award at a very prominent film festival backed by the United Nations. So we'll come back to the United Nations in a moment, but the connections are very, very, very deep. Now, the machinery for this monstrous idea is being put into place, not just in the United States, but all over the world. And it really is in the United States. The technocratic grip is really, it's got its arms around our throat. But we are not in the lead here. Actually, communist China seems to be the premier example of technocracy. Yeah, I know they're ruled by the Communist Party, and they're officially still communist. And in some ways, they do still, maintain the outer trappings of communism. But it's much more than that now. You now have a system where experts and technocrats, engineers, scientists are crucial players in the central planning rather than just bureaucrats involved in the Communist Party. And you now have a social credit system where the machines keep track of how reliable of a slave you are. Do you have the right opinions? Do you do what the Communist Party says? Do you have any friends who disagree with the Communist Party? Things like this. And all that is factored into a score created by algorithms that determines whether you are allowed to travel, whether you can leave the country, whether you can have a good job, whether you can be the recipient of higher education, things like that. So you have total technocratic control of the economy, massive central planning. And at the global level, this stuff is being implemented as well. On this show, we actually did an episode of Behind the Deep State on Agenda 2030. Now, Agenda 2030, when you drill down, is really a recipe for global technocratic government. The New World Order is going to be a global technocracy if these people get their way. Sustainable development. Very, very clearly, they're talking about shifting the entire economic system of the world, to quote the former head of the UN climate machine. And I want to talk briefly about Patrick Wood. We've interviewed Patrick Wood before. And he's got two books on the subject of technocracy. He's actually the guy who really has popularized this term at the grassroots level, right? The elites are very familiar with this term, but even in the freedom movement and the truth movement, not a lot of people were aware of this until Patrick Wood came on the scene with these two books. His first one was Technocracy Rising, the Trojan Horse of Global Transformation. You can see that right here. And then over here, you've got Technocracy, the Hard Road to World Order. I actually did a review of this one for the New American Magazine very recently that you can find if you click below. Before exposing the move toward technocracy, Patrick Wood was actually involved with a guy that we talk about a lot on this show, Anthony Sutton. I consider him to be one of America's finest historians, the late Anthony Sutton. He wrote incredible books exposing the role of the deep state in the rise of Nazi Germany, the role of the deep state in the Bolshevik Revolution, exposing the Skull and Bones Society that we did a whole episode on in this program. And he wrote a book with Patrick Wood. Anthony Sutton and Patrick Wood collaborated. It was called Trilaterals Over Washington. Now, if you haven't read this, it's an extremely important book. We also did an episode of this program on the Trilateral Commission where we mentioned that. You can go watch that episode if you'd like. Very informative. And this Trilateral Commission is extremely important. It's one of the deep state, behind the deep state organizations. It was founded by David Rockefeller, who we've talked about many times. I mean, this is a guy who boasted in his autobiography of being a conspirator working with a secret cabal against the best interests of his own country to form a one world political and economic order. And he founded it with this guy called Zbigniew Brzezinski, the national security advisor to everybody's favorite president, Jimmy Carter. Note the sarcasm there. And in 1973, they founded this Trilateral Commission. And David Rockefeller had read a book by Zbigniew Brzezinski called America's Role in the Technotronic Age, Between Two Ages. And this is basically a full-throated promotion of technocracy. So he argues that pretty much America is obsolete. Marxism is maybe the next step in human evolution. And then after that, we'll move toward technocracy, where the experts will decide things. And so their vision was kind of encapsulated in this term called the New International Economic Order. This was the goal that the Trilateral Commission said it was working toward. And when you drill down to it, as Patrick Wood explains very well, this new international economic order is just technocracy. It's just warmed over technocracy. And now we see this being implemented by trilaterals, by members of the Council on Foreign Relations, which we've also explored extensively in this series, by all these organs of the deep state. So let me give you some examples. Globalist John Podesta, who of course is a member of the Trilateral Commission, is very, very deeply involved with the elites and with the push for a new world order. He was also one of the key players behind Agenda 2030, the UN's global program to transform the planet into sustainable development. And they tell you in there the government should take control of production and consumption. The government should brainwash all children so that they'll promote sustainable development. I mean, that's how brainwashed they need to be. The government should control consumption and production. They should redistribute wealth. It's not enough to just have national wealth redistribution. Now we need redistribution among countries as well, not just within countries. These are all things in Agenda 2030. Now, Podesta, of course, was a very, very important figure in this, and he's been a very important figure in the U.S. government for a long time. Again, a member of the Trilateral Commission. He served as chief of staff for Clinton. He helped run Hillary Clinton's campaign. He was deeply involved in the Obama administration. And he's also, of course, the guy from Spirit Cooking, right? Who could forget the Spirit Cooking? Check out the images of Spirit Cooking. He was invited along with his brother to a Spirit Cooking with Marina Abramovich, and you can see some of the images from that. Absolutely disgusting stuff that these people are involved in. Now, the global warming hoax is also critical to this agenda to pushing technocracy. I mentioned earlier the head of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, her former head, her name was Christiana Figueres. She actually opened one of these climate summits in 2012 with a prayer to the Mayan goddess Ixchel. True story, actually. This was in Cancun, and quickly looked up Ixchel. She said it was the goddess of creativity, the Mayan goddess of creativity. Turns out it was actually the Mayan goddess of cannibalism, human sacrifice, and war. What an appropriate false idol to open up a prayer by the UN Climate Summit. Unbelievable stuff. And she said in 2015, this is a direct quote, this is probably the most difficult task we have ever given ourselves, which is to intentionally transform the economic development model of the world for the first time in human history. Now, one of the quotes that Patrick Wood relies on in this book, The Hard Road to World Order, which again is phenomenal, is really revealing as well. It actually appeared in the Council on Foreign Relations magazine, crucial deep state publication. And the quote was by a guy called Richard Gardner. He said this on The Road to World Order. It will look like a great booming, buzzing confusion, but an end run around national sovereignty, eroding it piece by piece, will accomplish much more than the old-fashioned frontal assault. This was in 1974, by the way. And again, this quote is really important to understanding what's going on here. Now, they are eroding sovereignty piece by piece, and it does look confusing, right? To the average person who watches the fake media, none of this makes any sense. Why are all these things happening? Why does our sovereignty keep getting more and more eroded? Well, once you understand the agenda, you understand what is going on here. More recently, another member of the Council on Foreign Relations, Dr. Parag Khanna, he wrote a book called Technocracy in America. And this basically proposes a technocratic form of government for the United States. We'll get rid of the U.S. Senate. We'll have a executive committee that'll make all the decisions, and we let the U.S. Supreme Court modernize the U.S. Constitution to make possible, the replacement of representative government with technocratic government. Now, other crucial components of technocracy, at least the road to technocracy, we have these public-private partnerships where you're melding government and corporate power into one, right? So the elitists get to make all the profits off the backs of the taxpayer, and they get to finance all kinds of idiotic projects that the free market would never support, right? Projects to convert us into a technocracy. Another crucial element of this is the erosion of local government, right? No more do we get to have elected city councils and county commissions, things like this. Increasingly, and this is happening all over America, probably in your community too, they are moving toward regional government. So you'll get, a group of cities will come together under this council of government or council of governments, a COG, happening all across America with incentives and funding from the federal government. And it's also happening on a broader scale too, right? In Europe, you have the European Union smashing national sovereignty. In Africa, you have the African Union. Putin is building the Eurasian Union. In the United States, Mexico, and Canada, they're working on a North American Union. Very, very important components of this. And so the regionalization of government, the removal of representative elected officials, with replacing that with bureaucratic, technocratic forms of government. Another key component of this will be the financial side of it, right? Rather than having plain old money, we'll be moving toward a different type of economy. Probably some type of cryptocurrency will be involved. And naturally, we'll move toward a cashless society. And the elites have been very, very active on this. Maybe we'll do a whole episode on the cashless society in the weeks and months ahead. Smart cities, of course, are another important component of this. They're herding us all into cities, kicking us all off our land. The New York Times just had a recent thing saying that single-family homes are actually racist and segregation. We should all live in stack 'em and pack 'em Agenda 21 houses, right? And I think Patrick Wood does something really important too. He points out in the book that this is really beyond just a physical problem. These people, he's got a whole chapter in here called "Worshiping the Creation," and what he explains is that these people have actually made technology, technocracy, scientism into an idol, and they are now worshiping the creation instead of the creator. He's got some great Bible verses in there to support that, and that is where we're moving, right? Now, you are inadvertently probably involved in this system already, right? You're already being surveilled, you're already being monitored, you're already being controlled. So one of the things Patrick Wood recommends in his book to help fight back against this is get off the social media stuff. Quit using Facebook and Google and Twitter. Give them disinformation. Rely on alternatives, right? Don't give them all your information. Don't let them track you and manipulate you. So we've got to resist. We've got to fight back, guys. If the deep state gets its way and we end up with this global technocracy, it is going to be the end of individual liberty, the end of Western civilization, the end of this, everything that we hold dear. So it's crucial that we resist this trend toward technocracy. And one of the ways to start getting involved is to first educate yourself. I'm Alex Newman. This was Behind the Deep State. Thank you very much for watching. Now, if you haven't watched the rest of our episodes, go back and do those. Get these books if you need them. Great resource if you want to learn about technocracy. Watch the interviews we've done with Patrick Wood and get involved in this fight and like, share, subscribe. YouTube is trying to shut us down now. They just took another one of our videos down without giving us any explanation, said it was a violation of terms of service. So help us get this information out, guys. Help share this with your contacts, with your family, with your friends, with your church, whoever it might be. Help us get the word out. We're not going to be able to defeat the deep state without people taking an active role in getting educated and educating others. So again, do what you can to help us get this word out. Thank you very much. God bless you. Again, I'm Alex Newman. Stay tuned for more.